The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as Gabrielle stood frozen, her ex-husband's cruel laughter echoing through the silent ballroom. "Look, everyone," he announced to the elite crowd. "My cleaning lady ex-wife somehow snuck into our gala." He had no idea he just made the biggest mistake of his life. The Grand Meridian Hotel's crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the opulent ballroom as Gabrielle Monroe adjusted her simple black dress one last time before stepping through the entrance. At 35, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that complemented her understated pearl earrings. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be her moment. For months, Gabrielle had been living what felt like two separate lives. By day, she worked as what she told people was a cleaning coordinator, managing janitorial services for various office buildings around the city. It was honest work, she told herself, and it kept her grounded. More importantly, it kept her invisible. After her devastating divorce from Preston Whitmore 8 months ago, invisibility had become her closest friend. The Pinnacle Foundation Charity Gala represented everything Gabrielle had once been part of and everything she'd lost when her marriage crumbled. The city's elite gathered here annually to celebrate their charitable contributions while networking and flaunting their wealth. She remembered attending these events on Preston's arm, smiling politely while he took credit for donations she had secretly funded, dismissing her business acumen as cute little hobbies that would never amount to anything real. As Gabrielle moved through the crowd, she noticed the familiar faces of socialites and business moguls she'd once called friends. They looked right through her now, their eyes sliding past her modest appearance to focus on more obviously wealthy attendees. The irony wasn't lost on her. She dressed deliberately simply tonight, wanting to blend in, to observe before making her presence truly known. That's when she heard the voice that still made her stomach clench with familiar dread. What in the hell is she doing here? Preston Whitmore's voice cut through the sophisticated chatter like a blade. At 42, he still possessed the kind of aggressive handsomeness that turned heads, his silver-touched hair and expensive suit projecting an image of success and authority. But Gabrielle knew the truth beneath that polished exterior. She knew about the insecurities, the need to tear others down to build himself up, the way he'd systematically undermined her confidence throughout their 7-year marriage. Standing beside him was Brittany Caldwell, a 28-year-old socialite whose family money had bought her way into high society's inner circles. Her platinum blonde hair was arranged in perfect waves, and her designer gown probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked at Gabrielle with the kind of disdain reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a designer shoe. "Preston, darling, who is that woman?" Brittany's voice carried clearly across the space between them, pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "That," Preston announced, his voice rising as he began walking toward Gabrielle, "is my pathetic ex-wife. The one I told you about. The one who thought she could run with the big dogs." Gabrielle felt every eye in their immediate vicinity turn toward her. Conversations paused mid-sentence as the drama began to unfold. She straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she'd built during the darkest months of her divorce, and met Preston's approach with calm dignity. "Hello, Preston," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I hope you're well." "Oh, I'm fantastic," he replied, his smile sharp and predatory. "The question is, what are you doing here? Did you finally save up enough from your cleaning job to buy a ticket? Or did you sneak in through the service entrance?" The cruel laughter that followed his words felt like a physical blow. Gabrielle was acutely aware of the growing circle of onlookers, their phones beginning to appear as they sensed potential viral content in the making. In today's social media world, public humiliation traveled at the speed of light. "I have every right to be here," Gabrielle responded, her voice remaining level despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "Do you?" Preston's voice grew louder, more theatrical. "Because last I checked, this gala is for people who actually contribute to society, people with real businesses, real money, real influence, not people who clean office buildings and dream about being relevant again. Brittany stepped closer, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. Preston told me all about your little fantasies, how you used to pretend you were some kind of business genius, how you'd spend hours on that computer of yours playing entrepreneur while he was out actually making money. The crowd was growing now, drawn by the spectacle like moths to a flame. Gabrielle recognized faces from her past life among them, people who had smiled at her across dinner tables, who had complimented her intelligence and business insights when they thought it might benefit them to stay on Preston's good side. Now they watched with the hungry eyes of spectators at a gladiator match. Some people just can't accept their place in life, Brittany continued, her voice carrying the casual cruelty that came so easily to those who had never truly struggled. It's actually kind of sad, isn't it? Clinging to delusions of grandeur when everyone can see exactly what you are. Preston nodded sagely as if he were delivering profound wisdom. That's always been Gabrielle's problem, living in a fantasy world. She never understood that just because she could balance a checkbook didn't make her Warren Buffett. The laughter that rippled through the crowd felt like acid on Gabrielle's skin. She thought about the hours she'd spent building her business empire while Preston slept, the late nights spent researching investments and analyzing market trends, the careful strategies she'd employed to hide her growing success from a husband who would have either stolen credit for it or sabotaged it entirely. You know what I think happened here. Preston's voice rose another octave, playing to his audience now. I think someone felt sorry for her and gave her a pity invitation. Or maybe she's working the event. Are you working tonight, Gabrielle? Did they hire you to empty the trash cans? The hotel security team had appeared at the edge of the crowd, their presence making Gabrielle's situation feel even more precarious. She could see the uncertainty in their eyes as they tried to assess whether she belonged here or represented some kind of threat. This is harassment, Gabrielle said firmly, though her voice was beginning to crack under the pressure of so many hostile stares. I have every right to be here, and you have no right to treat me this way. Rights, Preston laughed, the sound harsh and grating. You gave up any rights to move in these circles when you chose to throw away everything I gave you, when you chose to be ordinary instead of grateful. The pain in those words cut deeper than Gabrielle had expected. Even now, 8 months after their divorce was finalized, Preston still had the ability to find her most vulnerable places and press hard. He knew exactly how to make her feel small, insignificant, worthless. But then something unexpected happened. Stop this immediately. The voice was firm, authoritative, and belonged to Professor Williams, a distinguished elderly black man who had taught at Harvard Business School for over 3 decades. At 72, he moved slowly but with unmistakable dignity as he pushed through the crowd toward the confrontation. Do you people have any idea who you're speaking to? Professor Williams demanded, his eyes blazing with indignation as he positioned himself beside Gabrielle. Preston barely glanced at the professor, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. Look, old man, I appreciate you trying to help the help, but this doesn't concern you. This is between me and my ex-wife, who clearly doesn't understand appropriate boundaries. The help? Professor Williams's voice rose in disbelief. You arrogant fool. That woman was the most brilliant student I taught in 40 years of education. She revolutionized 3 different industries before she was 30 years old. The crowd began to murmur, uncertainty creeping into their previously confident mockery. Several people pulled out their phones, fingers flying over screens as they began searching for information. Professor, please, Gabrielle said quietly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. You don't need to defend me. Oh, but I do, the professor replied firmly. Because clearly these people have no idea they're in the presence of one of the most innovative minds in modern business. Preston's laughter became forced, less certain. Right. My ex-wife, the business genius. The same woman who couldn't figure out how to use the coffee machine in our kitchen. The same woman who spent her days playing on the computer while I built my company. But something had shifted in the crowd's energy. The easy mockery was giving way to curiosity and doubt. Phones buzzed with notifications as search results began appearing. Whispered conversations started at the edges of the gathering. Preston, Brittany said uncertainly, tugging at his sleeve. Maybe we should just go back to our table. No, Preston insisted, his voice rising to maintain control of the narrative. I'm not going to let her ruin this evening with her pathetic attention-seeking behavior. Security. He turned toward the hovering hotel staff. I want this woman removed from the premises. She's clearly unstable and has no business being here. That's when the hotel manager appeared, pushing through the crowd with an expression of barely controlled panic. Carlton Reed had managed luxury hotels for 20 years, and he'd never looked as terrified as he did approaching this particular confrontation. Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully, I think there might be some confusion here. No confusion, Preston declared confidently. This woman is trespassing. She doesn't belong here, and I want her removed immediately. Carlton's eyes darted nervously between Preston and Gabrielle. Sir, I'm not sure that's going to be possible. What do you mean it's not possible? Preston demanded. I'm a major donor to this foundation. I have influence here. I want her gone. Before Carlton could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Catherine Sterling, the evening's official host and one of the city's most respected philanthropists, approached with the commanding presence that had made her a billionaire before age 50. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her vintage emerald necklace caught the light as she moved with purpose through the crowd. Catherine! Preston's relief was palpable. Thank goodness you're here. This woman is disrupting your beautiful event. I was just having her removed. Catherine's sharp blue eyes took in the scene, moving from Preston's flushed face to Brittany's uncomfortable expression to the crowd of phone-wielding onlookers. Then her gaze settled on Gabrielle and something shifted in her expression. Ms. Monroe, Catherine said warmly, moving directly to Gabrielle and taking her hands. I am so terribly sorry for this treatment. This is absolutely unacceptable. The crowd fell completely silent. The name Monroe seemed to trigger recognition in some faces, while others looked increasingly confused. Catherine, don't let her manipulate you, Preston said desperately. She's very good at playing the victim. That's how she got half my assets in the divorce. Catherine turned toward Preston with a kind of cold stare that had made grown men resign from corporate boards. Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you stop talking immediately before you embarrass yourself further. Embarrass myself? Preston laughed, but the sound was becoming increasingly hollow. Catherine, this is Gabrielle, my ex-wife, the one who cleaned offices for a living. Surely you can see she doesn't belong at an event like this. Cleaned offices? Catherine repeated slowly, her voice growing dangerously quiet. Mr. Whitmore, do you have any idea who you're speaking about? The crowd pressed closer, sensing the approaching climax of the drama. Gabrielle remained silent, her expression unreadable as she watched her former life collide with her hidden present. I know exactly who she is, Preston insisted. She's nobody. A gold digger who got lucky in divorce court and is now trying to cling to relevance by crashing events she doesn't belong at. Catherine's laugh was sharp and incredulous. Nobody? Mr. Whitmore, you've just publicly humiliated the owner of this hotel. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathering as phones were raised to capture Preston's reaction. His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and finally the dawning horror of understanding. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? Gabrielle spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice calm and steady. Tell me, Preston, in all the years we were married, did you ever actually pay attention to what I was doing on that computer? Or were you too busy dismissing it as playing around? Preston's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the pieces began falling into place. The late nights she'd spent working, the mysterious phone calls she'd claimed were about her little projects, the way she'd never seemed particularly concerned about money, even when he'd threatened financial devastation during their divorce. While you were sleeping, Gabrielle continued, her voice gaining strength, I was building Monroe Global Enterprises. While you were dismissing my ideas as cute hobbies, I was acquiring companies, developing technologies, and creating jobs for thousands of people. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word as the truth unfolded like a carefully orchestrated revelation. The cleaning coordinator position I've held for the past 8 months, Gabrielle smiled slightly. That was my way of staying grounded, of remembering where I came from and what real work feels like. It also allowed me to remain invisible while I rebuilt my life without your shadow looming over it. Carlton, the hotel manager, stepped forward nervously. Ms. Monroe, I am so deeply sorry for this misunderstanding. If I had known you were attending tonight, we would have ensured proper protocols were followed. Actually, Gabrielle said thoughtfully, I'm glad it happened this way. It's been quite illuminating to see people's true colors. Preston had gone completely pale, his earlier confidence evaporating as the full magnitude of his mistake became clear. Gabrielle, I didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to know, she replied evenly. You were so convinced of my inferiority that you never considered the possibility that I might be your equal or your superior. Brittany, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable throughout the revelation, finally found her voice. Preston, I think we should leave. Actually, Gabrielle said calmly, I think that's an excellent idea. You see, as the owner of this hotel, I have the right to refuse service to anyone who creates a hostile environment for other guests. The crowd watched in fascination as the tables turned completely. Preston, who had minutes earlier been demanding Gabrielle's removal, now found himself on the receiving end of exactly the same threat. This is ridiculous, Preston sputtered, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. You can't throw me out. I'm a respected businessman. I have rights. You have the right to leave quietly, Gabrielle replied, or you have the right to be escorted out by security. Those are your options. Professor Williams stepped forward with a proud smile. Gabrielle, I have to say, watching you handle this situation has been the highlight of my evening. You've shown the kind of grace under pressure that I always knew you possessed. Thank you, Professor, Gabrielle said warmly. Your support means more to me than you know. Catherine Sterling moved closer to Gabrielle, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of introducing tonight's mystery benefactor. Ms. Gabrielle Monroe has pledged $50 million to establish the Pinnacle Foundation Scholarship Program, providing full educational funding for underrepresented students pursuing business and technology degrees. The applause that erupted was thunderous, but Gabrielle barely heard it. She was watching Preston's face as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The foundation he had publicly supported, the charity he had used to burnish his own reputation, was now being funded by the woman he had spent the evening trying to humiliate. You planned this, Preston said quietly, his voice barely audible over the applause. No, Gabrielle replied honestly. I planned to make the donation announcement quietly, without drama. You're the one who chose to turn this into a public spectacle. You're the one who decided that cruelty was more important than dignity. As security approached to escort Preston and Brittany from the premises, Gabrielle felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. For 8 months she'd been hiding, protecting herself from exactly this kind of confrontation. But now, standing in the center of the ballroom with the truth finally revealed, she felt more free than she had in years. The crowd that had gathered to witness her humiliation was now eager to network with her, to congratulate her, to associate themselves with her success. Some she greeted warmly, people who had shown her kindness even when they thought she was nobody important. Others she acknowledged politely but distantly, their earlier cruelty not forgotten, even if it was forgiven. As Preston and Brittany were quietly led toward the exit, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Gabrielle. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, Preston, it is. It's been over for 8 months. You're just now realizing it. The evening continued around her, but Gabrielle felt as though she was experiencing it from a great distance. The weight of years of hidden truth, of suppressed identity, of carefully maintained facades had finally been lifted. She was no longer Preston Whitmore's dismissed ex-wife or the invisible cleaning coordinator. She was Gabrielle Monroe, successful entrepreneur, generous philanthropist, and a woman who had learned that true strength came not from tearing others down, but from building them up. As she accepted congratulations and engaged in conversations with genuine admirers and opportunistic networkers alike, Gabrielle reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of building her business in secret, protecting it from a husband who would have seen it as a threat to his own importance, the painful divorce that had felt like losing everything but had actually been the beginning of finding herself, the months of deliberate invisibility that had taught her the difference between people who valued her for what she could do for them and people who valued her for who she truly was. In the end, Preston had done her a favor tonight. His cruelty had forced her out of hiding, had pushed her to stop protecting his feelings and start honoring her own truth. His attempt to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly, revealing not her weakness but his own insecurity and smallness. As the evening wound toward its close, Professor Williams approached her one final time. "Gabrielle, I know tonight was difficult, but I hope you understand what you've accomplished here. You've shown everyone in this room that respect isn't earned through fear or intimidation, but through character and kindness." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I've spent too many years trying to make myself smaller to fit into other people's expectations. Tonight reminded me that I don't owe anyone my smallness." The lesson was clear, not just for those who had witnessed the evening's drama, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel less than their true worth. In a world that often judges by appearances, by associations, by the surface markers of success and importance, Gabrielle Monroe had proven that true power lies in character, in resilience, and in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth regardless of who recognizes it. Sometimes the person you underestimate is the one holding all the cards. Sometimes the one you try to tear down is the one who will decide your fate. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving your superiority, but in maintaining your humanity even when others have lost theirs. Respect, Gabrielle had learned, isn't something you can demand or purchase or inherit. It's something you earn through your actions, your choices, and your treatment of others, especially those you perceive as having less power than you do. In the end, Preston's downfall wasn't caused by Gabrielle's hidden wealth or success. It was caused by his own cruelty, his own need to diminish others to feel important himself. The ballroom began to empty as the evening concluded, but the story would live on in social media posts, in whispered conversations, and in the changed perceptions of everyone who witnessed it. Gabrielle Monroe had entered the gala as a woman in hiding. She left as a woman fully revealed, ready to embrace not just her success, but her responsibility to use it wisely and with compassion. The greatest power she had learned wasn't in having wealth or influence. It was in using both to lift others up, to create opportunities, and to ensure that the next person facing what she had faced tonight would have the resources and support to not just survive the experience, but to thrive beyond it.